This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Spring has sprung, and with it comes plant sales, fresh flowers, and a whole lot of weeds. But what goes into starting a garden, and how do you create sustainable, productive, and beautiful landscapes? Today, we'll be feeling the buzz as we answer all of your gardening questions. And later, we'll hear about how you can create a way station for traveling pollinators in your very own backyard. We're joined today by Charlie Nardozzi. He's a horticulturalist and host of All Things Gardening on Vermont Public Radio. Charlie, welcome back to Where We Live.
Nice to be here, Catherine.
And also with us is Tom Christopher, who's also a horticulturalist and host of the Growing Greener podcast with WESU, Wesleyan University's radio station, and of course, serving communities around it. Tom, appreciate you being here as well.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Happy spring, everyone. And of course, for our listeners, we invite you to call in with all of your gardening questions, 888-720-9677. You can also find us online at Where We Live or shoot us an email, wherewelive@ctpublic.org. So we'd love to kick off the show today by asking both Charlie and Tom. I think we'll start with Charlie here. What are you excited to plant this year?
Well, I have a new book out, as you know, The Continuous Vegetable Garden, which just came out in February. And so as far as edibles go, there's a lot of fun things that are in the book. And some of these I've grown before, and some of them I'm trying out. So one section is all about perennial vegetables. Which is something that people, they think about asparagus and maybe rhubarb, but there's a whole host of other vegetables that are out there that are perennials, including some perennial onions that are really nice, perennial kales, and perennial broccolis that you can grow in our region. So that's a fun way to make the gardening easier, make it less work for you, it may be better for the environment, and especially better for the soil, because you're not turning, tilling, or digging the soil up. You're letting it really build up those nutrients that the plants would need. So yes, it's all about eating something. I know you asked me not to talk about that so early in the show because you get hungry.
Oh, no. I did not say you cannot, but we avoid just to give some people time to get their breakfast in. But you know what? You already kicked us off with this. So it's too late. So,
okay. Well, there it is.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned onions because we do have a very specific question about onions later on. I'm going to keep all of you on your toes. We'll ask that question later. But Tom, anything you're excited to plant this year or you already planted?
Well, I've started all sorts of vegetable seedlings down in my basement. I do about, last year I did 850 seedlings under lights in the basement. But the thing I'm really excited about, increasingly in gardening, I'm interested in how your garden can serve nature as a whole and, serve as a haven for wildlife and the caterpillars that songbirds need to raise their chicks and all these things. Anyway, I'm working on putting in a bunch of different patches of lawn that involve native grasses and wildflowers in them so that you can, have a lawn that's not only neat but colorful and also feeds all the butterflies.
Well, we also have a question about wildflowers in a second. And Charlie, just kind of based on what both of you have shared so far, we have had a pretty snowy winter here in New England, here in Connecticut. Had lots of inches of snow that I think perhaps we were not really expecting, but it should be sort of what a regular winter should look like. But Charlie, curious to hear, what have the effects of this snowy winter been?
Well, as long as we had a snow cover on the ground when it got really cold, we also have had a pretty cold winter too, temperatures below zero, that kind of thing. That will protect a lot of the plants, especially the herbaceous perennial plants, bulbs, and perennial plants like that. So I'm anticipating not having too many problems with that unless you've had a lot of mice and vole activity, because the snow actually protects them as well. So they're doing their little work underneath the snow cover when you're not knowing it. And then you come this time of year and you look around, you see tunnels everywhere and you wonder, are my bulbs going to come up? Are my perennials going to come up? So that one's yet to be seen how much damage that might have caused.
Well, it's so funny you say that because when you're describing those tunnels, I'm picturing really whimsical and cozy, sort of the picture books that you see, but maybe not so much for those who actually have a garden and have things that they're expecting to grow. And Tom, you were nodding a bit. Any thoughts on that as well? Well, how has weather affected your own gardening?
Well, actually, in a very good way. I do most of my gardening just over the border from Connecticut in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And for years, we have been protected. We've got a lot of hemlock trees here, one of the dominant trees in our woods. And for years, the cold weather protected us from a terrible pest, the woolly adelgid, which had killed a lot of native hemlocks to the south. But over the last couple of years, the winters have been so warm that it had come up into our area. But this winter, it seems to have beaten them back. I'm not finding any of my hemlocks, so I'm happy about that.
Well, and as we were just saying, the winters have been very mild, but this winter has been very snowy and very cold. So clearly the weather's been pretty unpredictable in many, many ways. Do you have any suggestions, Tom, on how to approach gardening with that in mind?
Just find really resilient plants. And, wild type plants, especially native plants, tend to be able to roll with the climatic punches, a little bit better than some of the beautiful things highly hybridized and selected that I grew in gardens growing up. And I still grow them in gardens, but I rely on a backbone of natives as a result.
What are some of the natives that you can suggest for people who are interested?
What I would say is contact the nearest Audubon Center or something like that. Find out what the plant community is for your area, and go with that.
And Charlie, any suggestions for you from you in terms of weather being really unpredictable? So suggestions on how to approach gardening with that in mind.
Well, yeah, Tom, just reiterating what Tom says, native plants are always great to use, the amelanchias, the aronias, a whole host of them. I think your next guest on the show can talk a lot about native plants as far as pollinators go, too. So that's certainly one thing you want to look at. And also, having healthy soil is really an important thing. No-dig gardening is something that I've been doing for a long time. I've written another book on that, that subject. And what that talks about is not disturbing the soil, leaving those microbes in there to form those networks so they can have a healthy soil so that plants can grow better. Water and nutrients can be transferred, all of those types of things. And I think with a healthy soil, it can withstand droughts and floods and all the other kinds of vagaries of weather that we've been getting because of climate change a lot better. And so if you have a healthy soil, of course, your plants are going to be healthier too.
Well, and it sounds like both of you are planting now. It's early April. Tom, should people be planting outside? Is it too early?
For traditional vegetables, it's just beginning to be planting season. But, check out what your local last frost date is, and then check out whatever you're growing, and it'll usually tell you, you can put it in after the last frost date or maybe, so many weeks before the last frost date, and that's a good reference.
And so we do have somebody who had asked a question on Instagram about last frost dates. Is Sadie from Hartford actually did ask, how do you know when the last frost is? Is there a place that you can check it out?
Yeah, there are a number. If you do a web search, and then there are typically a number of places. I mean, the Old Farmer's Almanac is one of them, where you can just type in your zip code, and it will tell you.
All right, perfectly straightforward. Thanks, Sadie, for the question, and also here for Charlie, for people who are looking to start gardening this year. Maybe this is the first time they're thinking about doing it or planning on doing it. What are some easier plants to start with, or where would you suggest them start?
Well, it all depends upon what kind of gardening they want to do. If it's an edible garden versus a flower garden, of course. But I'll just kind of assume it's your general annual garden, which means you'll have some edibles and some annual flowers in there. The first thing I would suggest is to build a raised bed. And this could be made out of woods like cedar, spruce, and fir and hemlock are all really good rot-resistant woods. They're going to last over 10 years in most cases. Make the bed I'd say about a foot deep, so you can get some 2x12, 2x10 lumber at a local lumber yard or a home center. 2-inch diameter wood, and you can make it as long as you want, but don't make it any wider than 3 to 4 feet. So that way you're not stepping on the soil. And then think about what you like. And I know people will look online and on books and they see the easiest vegetables to grow or easiest flowers to grow, and they plant them and they're like, well, I don't really like eating beans, but they grew really well. So
Sometimes
grow.
that you got to do it when you discover. That's how you discover something that you don't like, I guess.
Exactly. Or you might discover you like beans because you grew them yourself, which often happens with kids in gardening. So think about a couple things that you really want to have. Maybe it's a cherry tomato, maybe it's beans, maybe it's some lettuces, a zucchini plant. Maybe you love zinnias, maybe you love cosmos, marigolds, calendulas, a whole bunch of things. You just go to a garden center, you're just going to get overwhelmed with the choices. But think about having a small selection of things in that garden, space them properly, and then mulch them. Mulch that garden really well. It could be with grass clippings from an untreated lawn, or chopped up hay, straw, old leaves, that kind of thing. That's going to keep the soil nice and moist, and it's going to cover the soil, protecting those microbes I was talking about before, and ensure that you get a nice harvest coming out of that garden with flowers and with edibles.
Well, and Tom, it sounds like you're growing gardens in your basement under lights. So, for those who might have that kind of environment or are interested in starting gardening under lights, what are some suggestions that you would give them?
Oh, you can start so many different types of vegetables. Root crops should be sown directly into the soil. But I've got lettuce started, I've got collards started, I've got what? Oh, all kinds of things. Herbs started. Herbs are great because
I'm assuming these are also in raised beds.
they'll go out into, these are all on a shelf underneath LED lights. And when they get ready, I'll take them outside and expose them to a couple of hours every day of the outdoor sun and weather. Hardening them off, it's called, and then I'll take them up and I'll put them in my garden, which includes a number of raised beds, very much as Charlie described. It's great advice from him on that score.
Well, and listeners, you can give us a call with all of your gardening questions. We'll try our best to answer them. 888-720-9677. You can also find us online at Where We Live or send us an email, wherewelive@ctpublic.org. So, Tom, Memory from Instagram asks, who is eating my crocuses every spring? Is this a common problem?
Yeah, a lot of the spring bulbs, deer can be a real problem with that. They don't eat daffodils. Daffodils are mildly toxic. But they'll come in and, just snip off the tops of a lot of your spring bulbs. The repellents are pretty effective. Problem is people think that we've got, feel sorry for deer, that we've moved out into their territory. Actually, deer, for thousands of years in North America, have moved to be near people because they really like disturbed habitats. In fact, the indigenous people used to burn the forest to encourage deer herds. So, and deer populations have exploded. They love suburbia. So it's a problem. And I get the repellents, and I use them pretty heavily, and they're pretty effective.
Well, I love that you say that because one of my friends did build a raised bed, but it's the perfect height for an adult deer. So they literally just go through a garden buffet. And I'm like, you know what? You kind of did that to yourself. That's very funny to hear, but I'm very sorry that it happened to you. And so, Charlie, you also mentioned that you recently published a new book. Congratulations on that, called The Continuous Vegetable Garden. So can you give us more of an idea? What is a continuous vegetable garden?
Yes, there's a couple different thrusts of the book. Now, a lot of these concepts that are in the book are probably familiar to most of the gardeners that are out there. But what I hope to have done in this book is put them together in a system that you can use to go out in the garden and actually do this. So one of them is to garden more in tune with nature. So I use things like the no-dig gardening technique. I have a whole chapter on what that means and how to do that. Using perennial vegetables that I mentioned. Also using self-sowing vegetables, which is a real fun idea. I know people who grow pollinators, pollinator plants and perennials know a lot about self-sowing plants, but vegetables can self-sow too. And what we do is that we let some plants, for example, lettuce, bolt in our garden in the summertime. And instead of pulling it out, we let them bolt, set seed, drop the seed. Some of that seed germinates and we have a fall crop of lettuce. Some of it overwinters and we'll be getting a spring crop of lettuce. And the whole idea is that you don't have to plant it. You don't have to figure out when to plant it. You don't have to buy more seed. And you just go out and become a garden editor. So you just move seeds around because it's going to drop all over the place in pathways and beds you don't want it. Thin it out, move it around, and put it in there. So I have a whole chapter on that as well. And then I have a whole section with designs too, illustrated designs on how to do succession planting, companion planting, and interplanting, which is a way to have six, seven, eight types of edibles in one raised bed over the season by just rotating different plants through it, putting compatible plants together. And in the illustrations, I show what the bed looks like in spring, summer, and fall. So you really can see how to grow all these plants together. And there's more in it, but I don't want to take up too much time about that. But
No
that's kind of
spoilers. No spoilers for those who want to pick up the book, right? Yeah. And so how should people get started if they do want to start making a continuous vegetable garden?
Well, I think it's starting with the raised bed and having a really healthy soil in there. You can use the technique of no dig or lasagna gardening by putting organic layers in the bed and then topping it with compost and then planting right through that. Or you can just get a mix of compost and topsoil. I usually tell people to get like a 60-40 mix, 60% topsoil, 40% compost, and put that in the bed. And then once you have those things in there, it's a matter of kind of planning it out as far as what's going to grow now. So you mentioned peas before, for example. That's a great early spring crop. We'll be planting that pretty soon, especially with the warm weather that's coming up. It's going to warm up things really quickly. But peas and lettuces and having them in there. But when they're done, this is one thing that most gardeners forget to do or just don't have the hard heart to do it, which is when those peas are done, don't wait till the last pea comes. Cut them down when most of the peas have been harvested, and that opens up the space for another crop. So like some summer beans you can put in there, or some zucchinis and cucumbers. A lot of people don't realize you can plant a couple times in our region during the season and have an early crop, a late crop, a mid crop, and a late crop. And then go into the fall with things, again, that will be more cool season tolerant, like kales and Swiss chard and things of that nature. So I think kind of thinking about your bed, what you like to grow, and then thinking ways that they might grow together would be a nice thing.
Well, I think we're setting up the scene for many of those who are feeling inspired to get outside and start gardening immediately. And Tom, I know you made some suggestions for those who are interested in perhaps planting things under lights and all that. So for those who are inspired and wanting, feeling antsy of doing anything related to gardening after the show, what are some suggestions you would give them?
Well, growing things under light is a lot of fun. It's probably my favorite part of the gardening year. Seeing every time, it was what got me hooked on gardening when I was 7 years old, was watching. I stole a pea from my mother's pantry, a dried pea, and put it in water, and then it sprouted, and it was like magic. And it's still like magic every time a seed comes up. So you can start things in a seed starting mix under, just get an inexpensive metal shelving unit and hang strips of LED lights on it. They don't cost a lot of money to keep lit. And just start your garden there, so when the weather gets good, you get a head start. You can put plants out instead of just seeds. And that's one way to get going.
Well, I love that you use the word magic, because I think my first show with Charlie, we used magic a lot. And I think we kind of overdid it. So we didn't do it ever since then. But we appreciate you bringing the word back. You've been listening to horticulturist Charlie Nardozzi and Tom Christopher, who will both be staying with us for the hour as we answer all of your gardening questions. And let us know, what have you planted this year? Or if you're planting or you're planning on planting anything, we would love to hear about it. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us online at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. More and more people are pivoting away from grass lawns to lawns full of native plants and pollinator habitats. Still with us are horticulturalist Charlie Nardozzi and Tom Christopher. Joining us now is Donna Merrill from Pollinator Pathway, which is a national organization devoted to building connecting habitats for pollinators. Donna, thanks so much for joining us today. Oh, Donna, you might still be on mute. Oh, there you go. I think you're still on mute, Donna. Giving you a moment here.
Oh,
there you are.
I am off. Okay. Shows you my inexperience with being on the radio. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I've really enjoyed the beginning of the show. Like everybody, I am itching to get outdoors and get my hands in the dirt. So, but I'm here to talk about the pollinator pathway.
Yes.
And I'm happy to, it's a different look at our world. I look at things from kind of the 30,000 foot level, but it's very much a Connecticut story, even though we are national and international now. So I'd love to tell you our story a little bit.
Yeah, tell us more about that and what exactly is the pollinator pathway?
Sure. Well, our mission is to educate and inspire and support people to protect habitat for pollinators. And it all kind of started from here in Connecticut. I don't even know where to start the story. It's a little bit different. I was part of the Regional Conservation Partnership in Fairfield County, Connecticut, back in the teens, 2010 through 2020. And we were approached by the U.S. Forest Service because they said, oh my gosh, we have a problem in Connecticut with our projections. Right now, this was 2015, the state is about 60% forested land and 35% suburban sprawl and urban development. And we're seeing these numbers flipping by the year 2060, so that, suburban sprawl and urban development will really be about 60% of our state. And we need to reach out to landowners and have them help us protect our ecosystems and protect our natural environment. And we don't know how to talk to landowners. The state of Connecticut is 94% private property, and we're the government. So, we don't really have access to private property owners. So do us a favor, come up with some ideas that we could use to connect with people to take care of their backyards in a healthy way and protect our forests and our trees. So there were 5 of us that were supposed to come up with some ideas, and the government said, don't worry about if you fail, because if you fail, then we know what not to do. So I had a muse, and my muse was the city of Oslo, Norway. And there was somebody there, and it just hit the news wires about 2015. Someone there had said, oh, I'm so worried about the bumblebees and the bees and butterflies in Norway. How can they survive our city environment? So this person went out and encouraged corporations to put roof gardens on the tops of tall buildings, and the people who lived in apartments had pots of plants out on their balconies, and all of the stop signs in the city had rings of plants around them. And this way, the bees could migrate through the urban environment. And I thought, wow, what a great idea! I'll see if I can build what I called a bee highway between the Hudson River and the Housatonic River in Connecticut. And so I went out and I took some money out of the grant, and I bought 3 varieties of native shrubs. And maybe since you've got a gardening audience here, I could take a minute to just tell you why I picked the 3 shrubs and 1 tree.
Well, I did want to have you emphasize, why is it important that we have these native plants and to create these pathways for pollinators?
Exactly. So our pollinators need native plants. The number 1 destroyer of ecosystems is the lack of native plants. And we do have a problem with collapse, loss of biodiversity and loss of our native birds and our butterflies. Everybody knows about the saga of the monarch butterfly, or most people do know. And this is all based on the fact that we do need not only native plants, but native plants to provide resources from very beginning of the season in March all the way through when everything goes dormant in November. So it is important to have early blooming native plants and never have a gap of more than 3 weeks without a native plant blooming or having some sort of leafy environment that would provide the food for caterpillars.
Well, and of course, this is more based on where you live, really, and your local area. But do you have suggestions or give us an idea of what are some of the best native plants in Connecticut or for Connecticut to attract pollinators?
Exactly. So, for example, with this outreach to start our pollinator pathway in Connecticut, I chose the early blooming serviceberry, which is in Connecticut a lot of times called shadbush, because it blooms when the shad return to spawn up the Connecticut River. So that would be an early spring blooming source of pollen and nectar for our bumblebees that come out very early. I chose the North American or the native dogwood tree, which is the larval host for 117 different species of moths and caterpillars. So that's, of course, blooms in June, but its leaves are the food that form the basis of our food web. So our caterpillars can then become our spring azure butterflies and the moths that are so important. And then the third shrub I chose for this project was the winterberry, which is our native holly. It is deciduous, not evergreen, but its most important function is providing the red berries that form in the fall, and they particularly concentrate the lipids and fats that our birds that stay here all winter long need to make it through the winter. So it covers the 3 main seasons, these 3 varieties of shrubs or 2 varieties of shrubs and the understory tree of our native dogwood.
Well, and so I just quick pivot here, or not necessarily pivot because it's all connected. Building on what Donna just talked about, Tom. For people who want to keep their lawns, but to make them pollinator friendly, what can they do? This seems to be something that more and more people are interested in.
Yeah, there's a lot they can do, and this is, I think, really exciting because the problem that the Forest Service brought to Donna is largely a result of indiscriminate lawn planting. Lawn is now the biggest irrigated crop in North America. And the typical lawn is a few different types of grasses that were imported from other continents and don't serve our native insects really at all. So we've got this, vast expanse of Connecticut that's been kind of taken off the board for pollinators. And there's been some really interesting research. I keep interviewing people on my program about native cool season grasses that are low growing, that will adapt to a lawn. And if you take a low growing grass and don't mow it too often, just a couple of times over the summer, then it can also integrate with a whole bunch of wildflowers. So you can turn your lawn into a bit of a pollinator pathway stop too. Although I certainly would recommend going with the kind of shrubs and trees and so forth that Donna's talking about, and the all the different types of planting that wonderful organization Pollinator Pathways recommends. But people could be doing it with their lawn too, and you could have all the benefits of a lawn and yet have something that's really pretty and fruitful. For instance, I've been putting in a lawn of wild strawberry plants. and it flowers in the spring, and then you get berries, which the turtles, by the way, love. We get turtles coming in for our berries, and then you get the leaves turn color in the fall, and it's.
Well, that sounds like a great plan because I'm a big turtle fan, so I know what I'm doing immediately after this show. So appreciate the great idea, and because there's been mention of not mowing a lot and also no digging, Charlie. I know you have mixed feelings about no mow May, which is a conservation effort to encourage people who have lawns to avoid mowing for a month to help early season pollinators. So curious to hear your thoughts on this movement.
So no mow May is a great idea. The intention is great to leave lawns to let all of these what we call weeds, but actually are pollinating plants for bees to flower and to be food sources for bees as they come out from their winter dormancy. The problem is, of course, June 1st, everyone gets their mower out and mows everything down. And so it's kind of like you've been feasting all month and then now it's a famine. So, like Tom was talking about, there's a lot of great research out there, and I just wanted to highlight one at the University of Minnesota. Marla Spivak has been doing research out there, creating what she calls bee lawns, and these are a mix of things that Tom has been talking about. So she uses fine fescue, white clover, which is not a native, but is a very good pollinator plant, prunella or heel, self heal, which is a native, and creeping thyme. And the mix of these plants is important because they can flower at a low height. So you can still mow your lawn at 3.5 inches or so high and have it look like a lawn, function like a lawn. You can walk across it, you can play on it, all those things. But it still allows those plants to flower, which is going to make great habitat and great food for these bees.
Well, then jumping from lawns to perhaps people who are in apartments or spaces that are very limited, but they want to grow things, Charlie, any tips for balcony growers, for example?
Well, I think just get something that's going to flower. The key with any pollinator or any kind of insect is to have flowering from early spring all the way through late fall, if you can. And the nice benefit of being in either a patio or a balcony or a high rise or somewhere like that with a place that you can grow things is that often you can jump the season. You can get out there earlier than other people and you can go later than other people. So thinking in terms of native annual flowers that are not overly hybridized, ones that are more like the native versions of those plants, having those in a garden that'll be flowering all season long, doing succession of perennial plants that'll be flowering all season long. There's lots of resources out there that'll tell you what are good pollinator plants. Just look at ones that'll be small enough and it'll be dwarf enough to fit in a container, and you can create your own little habitat there. And you can sit out, have a cup of coffee, watch the butterflies come in. It'd be great.
That sounds amazingly idyllic. And so I have a very specific question coming from Connecticut Public ourselves, perhaps for all three of you, so whoever wants to jump in. So we're looking to do some planting this spring in our parking lot. And so there are no raised beds. We're thinking about bringing in some beds, but there are some, grassy areas and trees and all that jazz and birds and squirrels coming in. So any tips on parking lot gardening? Raised beds versus seeds versus bulbs, any thoughts, Tom?
Well, yeah, it's a particular type of habitat. It gets hot and
Right.
dry and salty in the winter. And so what does that sound a little bit like? Maybe a beach. Years ago, I planted a bayberry in the planting islands and Rosa rugosa, actually. This was before I was into natives. I would probably choose a native species of rose because a lot of pollinators and caterpillars have very specific associations with certain native plants. But the bayberry and the roses just thrived. They loved it, and they didn't care if they got salt from the salt truck in the winter time like that. So that's one thing. Ornamental grasses do very well in a setting like that. And they can be very, very attractive and, again, serve wildlife.
Well, then, Donna, curious to hear from you, too. Are pollinators okay with lots of rows and cement and rocks and things?
Absolutely. And, just to add to Tom's list of suggestions, there is a goldenrod. Goldenrod is a very important pollinator plant because it's one of the last sources of pollen available to our bees and butterflies before winter comes. And there's it's called seaside goldenrod, and it is salt tolerant. So, there are salt tolerant plants even among our most common native plants that you can kind of pick and choose. But one thing I wanted to mention about parking lots is back in the 70s, when a lot of the corporations were starting to build headquarters along Route 95 and Route 91, a very common tree to plant in corporate parking lots, on the edges of corporate parking lots, was the red maple. So now a lot of these red maples are 40 or 50 years old, and they're in bloom just as I speak here in Connecticut. And those blooms need to be pollinated. And there is a pollinator called the cellophane bee, which only is at the adult phase for about the same 6 weeks that our red maples are blooming. So there is this specialized relationship between the need of our red maples to get pollinated and the need for the cellophane bees, which are ground nesting bees, to find the pollen that they can use to feed their larvae, which are going to be growing right now. So parking lots are great places, and we need those sandy kind of barren strips for our ground nesting bees. They're not going to nest in places that have mulch on them. They're not going to nest in places that are covered with leaves. They need that kind of area right above the curb where there's nothing but compacted dirt. So there's always a place where you can help nature.
Well, I don't know about my fellow coworkers, but I'm very excited to get this parking lot gardening going on. And Charlie, I have another specific question for you, but any thoughts about parking lot gardening?
Well, I think that they're covering the bases here with Tom and Donna. Just also selecting plants that are drought tolerant, because that's another thing that happens. Heat and drought tolerant. Because of all that asphalt, it's going to get really hot in the soil and on that whole area around there. So you really have to look at plants that can really tolerate that, and looking more towards succulents maybe, or some different kinds of hard cactuses and things of that nature. Because it's great to have all kinds of beautiful flowering plants in there, but if they don't survive, then that gets people very frustrated with any kind of garden. So look for really tough plants that can make it.
Well, a question for you before break. Our amazing senior producer, Tess Terrible, has a question for you. Can you explain what leggy means? My mom says my herbs are leggy and I have to fix them.
That's when you grow really tall when you're young and you get lots of...
Okay.
Very leggy, just very leggy. Leggy means your plants are stretching because they're not getting enough light. So that could happen this time of year when you're starting things indoors. A lot of people like to start seeds, as Tom was saying, indoors, maybe in a windowsill. And that's a great idea. And even a south-facing windowsill is nice, but it's still not going to have the intensity of light that those young little seedlings need. Whether it be a flower or a vegetable, doesn't really matter. So it'll start elongating and get really leggy. And the problem with that is, of course, when you go to move them outside, they're going to flop over. They're going to be more susceptible to winds and things of that nature. You want a strong seedling. So keeping the lights on them, as Tom was talking about, LED lights are great. Keeping them close to the top of the plant and raising them as they go up is a good idea. Another little tip if you're growing tomatoes is to brush them with your hand 20 times a day. It's 20 brushes, not 20 times, but 20 brushes a day. What that does is it creates motion. And what the motion does is creates thicker cells along the stems so they stay a little stockier. You can easily do it with a little fan, like a little muffin fan or something placed there too. But it's a nice activity, especially if you have kids or grandkids around. Tell them to go brush the tomatoes.
It sounds like a very cathartic activity. We're all making this face right now because we're learning this very new thing that we're all very eager to try the moment we get back off the show. So Tess, I hope that answers your question. I wish I knew what leggy felt like because I'm still waiting for my moment. Donna, Charlie, and Tom will be staying with us. Get your spring gardening questions in before the end of the show. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us online at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. We're back with our annual Spring Gardening Hour with horticulturalist Charles Naldozzi, Tom Christopher, and Donna Merrill, who's the president of Pollinator Pathway. I want to jump straight back to questions. This might be for Charlie or Tom, but we got a question from Instagram. Michelle asks, do you have any tips for growing and harvesting basil indoors? And Alexandra also adds to that, what is the best place to pinch basil? Charlie?
Me?
Go. Charlie, I think the question might be for you.
Pinching basil, yes, that is actually an important thing to do if you want to get a lot of basil. So as the basil starts growing, when it gets up, I would say 8 inches, 10 inches tall or so, I would just pinch the growth point that where those little leaves are right in the top. Just give it a pinch with your fingernails. Don't cut your nails that day, so you have nice sharp nails. Pinch it out. And when you do that a number of times during the growing season, you're going to get a squat plant that's bushy, and the bushy plant's going to have a lot more leaves on it. And if you're growing the Genovese basil for making pesto or cooking, that's what you're really looking for. Other interesting little thing about basil, it's a great pollinator plant, right, Donna?
Yeah.
So I always grow extra basil to let it just flower. So everyone talks about pinching the flowers off because you get more leaves. It's absolutely true. But if you leave some of them out there to let them just flower, and it could be the white flowers or the Siam queen, which is a Thai basil, has purple flowers. Great pollinator plant, great way to attract bees to your herb garden.
One thing about pinching, that's an underused technique in American gardens. It's great for all types of really tall growing perennials to make them come in bushier and more compact. There's something that gardeners call the Chelsea chop, which is when you pinch back your perennials by, maybe 6-8 inches at the time of the Chelsea Flower Show in England, which is late May. You can tell who developed the Chelsea chop. But it's a really good technique to keep in mind for keeping things, herbs, perennial flowers, anything that is later blooming that you want to come in bushier.
Well, thanks, Michelle and Alexandra, for those questions. And Donna, we've been talking a lot about pollinators and the importance of pollinating. How can people here in Connecticut get involved with the pollinator pathway?
Well, it's really spread pretty much across the state, and we're now there's 169 towns in Connecticut, and I believe 103 of them have organized pollinator pathways. And the best way to find out if there is a pollinator pathway group in your town is to go on to our website, pollinator-pathway.org, and you will see a drop-down menu of pathways, and you click on Connecticut, and then the list of towns that are on the pathway that have, brought together their garden clubs and their conservation commissions and whatever, and are working on, building a awareness about pollinators. So there's that, or you can email us at info@pollinator-pathway.org, and we will get right back to you and give you whatever information you need. We started out just kind of initiating pollinator groups, but at this point, we've really switched over to focusing more on providing the resources that people need to know about what to do in their backyards to support caterpillars and native bees and moths and all of those things. So it's all on our website.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, this information will be available on ctpublic.org/wherewelive. So if you did not make a note of that, have no fear. It will be on our website at ctpublic.org/wherewelive. And so I think Charlie mentioned onions earlier. So I want to come back to that onion question because our very own Kyone Wolf, who's the host of Audacious, is a big onion fan. And she asks, how do I get my onions to grow bigger? I can never seem to get them to be as bulky as the seed packet suggests they can be.
Yeah, so if you're starting it from seed, you need to start them really early. I start our onions in February under lights and let them grow and get to be pretty good sized transplants. If you're just starting out, it's probably the simplest thing to do is just go buy sets. You can get the white or yellow or red onion sets. But the other key is to put them out early too. They're one of those plants that can take a little bit of frost. So in Connecticut, you could probably put them out late April, early May. Get them out there, get them in a raised bed. They like well-drained soil. They have very shallow roots. Compost amended, that's going to help too, and space them out pretty well. If you do all of those things, getting it out early with really healthy soil, then you'll get larger bulbs. You could also buy varieties that are naturally larger. The Walla Wallas, for example, are big onions, so they're naturally going to have the genetics to be a big onion.
Anything to add, Tom?
Yeah. I have found my experience has been that if you start them from seed early, as Charlie says, you'll get bigger bulbs than you will from sets. I have not been impressed by the harvest I've gotten from sets, and it's cheaper and it's fun to start things from seed. The other thing is make sure they get regular irrigation during dry spells and fertilize. They like fertility if they're going to get those big bulbs. That can all make the difference. This is something I've learned over the years, coming from like tiny little onions that were kind of disappointing to now my wife Suzanne and I grow, she braids them, and we grow enough big onion bulbs that we store them. We have onions year round.
Well, and Liliana from Hartford asks, what the difference is when starting seeds versus plugs versus sets, and what do all of these mean for those who are unfamiliar? Tom?
Yeah, seeds, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're sowing the seeds in a seed sowing mix typically. It's doing it right into garden soil isn't so good. It doesn't have the perfect texture. It may have all kinds of disease-carrying fungi like damping off that'll be a problem for you. Plugs are simply plants that have been grown in trays with cells in them, and the plugs tend to be deeper than the average cell and narrower, and so you get those, and those are ready to go out in the garden.
Well, you all mentioned sets. What's exactly a set?
Well, an onion set is essentially a small dormant bulb.
Well, and Charlie, got another question for you here. If there are any new innovations in gardening that you're excited about?
New innovations in gardening. Let's see. Well, vertical gardening is becoming very popular, especially with people who have small spaces. Like you're talking about balconies, patios, decks, things like that, to grow things vertically. And so in the edible world, I always go back to that because I wrote this book recently. It's all over my head. There are certain vegetables that you can grow vertically so you save space. Everyone knows about a bush bean versus a pole bean, for example, or peas. But there are things like zucchinis. There are zucchini varieties now. There's one called the Incredible Escalator that grows and trains up. So you can just train it up against the fence, against a trellis, something of that nature. You can do that with some of the smaller melons and some of the smaller butternut squashes. And of course, there's a whole host of beautiful annual vines that you can trellis up too. I particularly like the cardinal climber vine. The cypress vine has little red flowers, great as a pollinator plant. Hummingbirds love it. That'll weave itself up a fence. So if you're looking to maximize your space, think vertically. Look at things that can grow up, and it'll be really nice to have as a block as well as the beauty of it.
And Donna, quickly, at about 20 seconds here, any new innovations in gardening that you're excited about?
Oh, geez. I think that just the prevalence of native plants in our nurseries and in wherever you can buy plants, I think that is really a really healthy innovation that's coming. These plants are much more easily accessible now. So good news.
Anything, Tom, that you're excited about this season? About 20 seconds.
Excuse me. Yes. Sorry. Is use of microorganisms to control diseases.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. You've been listening to Tom Christopher, who's the host of Growing Greener on WESU, Donna Merrill, president of the Pollinator Pathway, and of course, Charlie Nardozzi, host of All Things Gardening on Vermont Public Radio. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Isaac Moss. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where You Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.